We heard earlier on from Professor Falke a quotation from the Psalms to begin with. And I wish to begin in the same way, because it is always a good idea to take one's precedent from astrophysicists who, after all, tend to know what happened before.
Good evening, Rowan. It's the 18th of June 2016 and it's about 1:30. And obviously I'm making you my usual video before the weekend to let you know that I'm not going to be seducing any priests this weekend. I've already let you know that this is only for the time being, and as soon as you're in prison I'm going to start seducing priests. But after that, I'm already on the lookout. Be prepared, that's my motto. And the only reason I'm not seducing priests at the moment is because I know how much it infuriates you, and that makes me laugh a great deal. So, as I've said before, if I had no other reason to remain celibate, I'd do it just to infuriate you. But then I know it'll infuriate you even more if I start seducing priests when you're in prison. So that's what I'm planning to do. And in any case, it'll perk me up no end after all the trauma I've been through. I'm really looking forward to it. I just can't wait till you're in prison. I've got all this to look forward to. Anyway, I thought we could have a little chat about some of your ongoing lunacy, which has been ongoing virtually since you were born, I think. But one thing I've noticed, and I have commented on this before, that you seem to want to redefine what it is to be a human being. Now, being a human being is an inherent identity. You know, it's a separate species from other animals and from other creatures on the planet, and we're not inanimate objects. And even a small child knows the difference between a human and a non-human, or someone who's mentally impaired would know the difference as well. So it's very clear cut who is a human being and who isn't. But for some reason, you seem to want to redefine this, and you refer to this over and over and over again. I'm only giving a couple of examples tonight, but I have referred to it before in the talk that you gave about aid and development, where you were recommending a book called Manifesto for the New World Order. So I did mention it there because you were talking about poor people in the developing world and saying basically, you know, if someone's living in poverty, they're not fully human as you define it. You never really give any definition of what full humanity is, but you refer to certain categories of people as not being fully human, and one of these categories of people is poor people. I mean, personally, I don't think that you really regard anyone as fully human. You only see ciphers, as I've said before, and your job as the centre of the universe and God Almighty, as you see it, is to manipulate these ciphers around you, to do what you want and to give you what you want. And you repeatedly express confusion that people don't behave in what you consider to be a reasonable way, whereas you don't seem to understand that enslaving yourself to a psychopath like you isn't exactly reasonable. It's not a reasonable request that someone like you should demand that I become a sex slave, that you can just snap your fingers and I'm just going to start offering sex to you and to anyone you decide, like that disgusting pervert David Pete. That isn't reasonable behaviour. And nor is it reasonable to expect me to go and involve myself with David Peat, as you were suggesting in that talk that you gave at the Greenbelt Festival in August 2004, after all the abuse he'd put me through. And then you had me thrown out of the church, but I didn't know it was you who was behind it at the time. But you consider that to be a reasonable solution, that I should just go back and say, oh, it's all right, and I'll never say anything so nasty about you again, even though you know perfectly well that everything I said was true. And then you seem to think I want to be involved with you, and it's unreasonable of me not to want to be involved in you, despite all the evil abuse you've put me through, and the fact that you were inciting other people to treat me in an evil way. And the last time I saw you in Sheffield, you were treating me in a very manipulative and abusive way then as well, gaslighting. And by your behaviour, giving me long looks of concern, theatrical concern, signalling to the other people at the meeting that there was something wrong with me and some reason that you needed to be concerned about me. So this is what an evil, abusive, manipulative bastard you are. Yet for some mysterious reason, you're very confused that I'm rejecting your solutions to this situation, which you see as reasonable. That's because you don't view me as a human being. You don't really view anyone as a human being, but you particularly don't view me as a human being because I'm of no use to you and I'm an obstacle to you, and so it's your job to either get me on your side or destroy me, and there's nothing in between. So you don't really see anyone as human, but I think it's part of the political agenda that you be undefining human being from being an innate identity, an inherent identity. Someone of the species of Homo sapiens is a human being, and you want to blur the distinctions around that, the same as you try to blur the distinctions around everything. And I've given the example of the way that you blur distinctions around what is Christian and what isn't Christian, and you're just generating chaos and confusion and obfuscation and saying that things aren't decided yet, which are quite obviously decided. The most lunatic example of this was you saying it wasn't decided. It wasn't decided that the universe was finished or something, referring to David Peat. And I said, well, I've decided, and it's my body and my life, so it is decided, and I've moved on. But you can't accept that. You've got to keep obfuscating and creating as much confusion and stress on people as you possibly can. But unfortunately for you, I know exactly the game you're playing. Not only is this behaviour inherent in your disturbed and narcissistic personality, but it's also further in the political agenda that you're promoting, that your puppet masters are telling you to promote. And this is a theme that comes up repeatedly in your rhetoric, that certain states of being make people less than fully human. I'm assuming you consider yourself to be fully human, and who gets to decide who's fully human and who isn't? Because I'm assuming that the poor people who you're saying are not fully human, they probably think that they are fully human and would be very offended to hear this suggested to them. You're a very patronising and arrogant man, and there's a lot more to human identity than having wealth and going along with your bullshit agenda and giving a psychopath like you everything that they want. You make very unreasonable demands. You've got a great sense of entitlement. You're not entitled to anything. Anyway, I shan't go on any longer because I've put some clips together to demonstrate some of your pseudo-spiritual mumbo-jumbo or lunacy, as you might call it, and also how this kind of fits into the subversive agenda that's been implemented by the CIA and other related intelligence organisations. So I'll leave it there for now, but remember, I won't be seducing any priests over the weekend, but I'm just waiting till you're in prison, and then I'm off the leash, so to speak. So you make sure you spend a long time thinking about that, won't you? Hasta la próxima.
It's possible for people to live with about 5 to 10% of their humanity really engaged. Lots of people do. And that's really not good enough. Human beings deserve better. They deserve to have the fullness of their humanity engaged. And it's as we discover more and more of what that humanity really entails that we find we have more room for one another, more room for compassion, more room for imagination.
Not only are we invited by the psalmist to consider the heavens, we're invited to consider ourselves. What are human beings that you are mindful of them? Now that question, what are human beings that God should be mindful of them, is a question which any university of Catholic and Christian foundation is bound to take very seriously. But beyond all that is our human capacity for contemplation. Perhaps one of the most surprising things about our humanity is that for all its restless activity, its intellectual intensity and creativity, it is capable of being still, of being silent, absorbing the reality before it with joy, with gratitude, but in stillness. We are not fully human unless we take completely seriously our capacity to be still. We are not fully human if all we do is feverish activity. We must learn to breathe. We must learn to sit. We must learn to look. And in breathing and sitting and looking, we find our humanity just as much as in the restlessness of art and science and the complexities of politics.
Look at the camera.